Welcome! You have just tuned in to Awakening the Gift with psychic medium Montana Greene, igniting a stream of consciousness within you. Are you ready to feel more comfortable talking about and trusting your own intuition? You can learn to embrace your own natural and subtle abilities. The possibilities are limitless. Hi, I'm psychic medium Montana Greene, and together we will look at all of life, yourself, and your fellow living beings through an expanded spiritual lens by examining spirituality, mysticism, and metaphysics. Stay tuned for insights into the human energy field, spiritual principles, and tools on how to care for and utilize these for the highest and greatest good of humanity. Awakening to our spiritual gifts has never been more on time. Awakening to the gift starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Montana Greene, and you are listening to Awakening the Gift on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us ignite a stream of consciousness in you. Each second and fourth Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific, we have insightful conversations about spirituality, higher consciousness, and all things metaphysical, helping to ignite a stream of consciousness in you. Prepare to be enchanted as we welcome extraordinary psychic and healer Theresa Michelle Servin. In today's episode, we embark on a mystical journey into the realm of old world knowledge and sacred wisdom. In an age where information is at our fingertips, we ask the burning question, should such profound ancient wisdom be freely accessible? Join us as we unravel the secrets and explore the ethics of gatekeeping these timeless teachings. This is an episode you won't want to miss. Theresa is a gifted and natural psychic medium with a profound connection to the spiritual realm. From a very young age, her extraordinary abilities as a medium and psychometrist, which we will discuss a little bit more, were evident to her close friends and family. Bridging the gap between the living and the departed with compassion and clarity, she is spoken to and can provide information on both the seeker and the soul. Born into a long line of healers, she also receives intuitive insights that offer profound clarity and directions and old world knowledge. Theresa is a highly sensitive and possesses deep understanding of experiences and provides empathic support and practical solutions. Welcome, Theresa Michelle Servin. How are you?
Thank you, Tana, so much for that warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here today and just to share with you and talk with you about this very interesting and exciting subject.
Yes, this is a topic that many people in the spiritual realm have a lot of passion about. There's a lot of opinions going on right now, most particularly between those that have been in the field for many, many years, or the OGs,
Right.
to say, versus kind of the newcomers. But let's back up just a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about your own history? Obviously, we know from a very young age you discovered your abilities, but I'm curious, were there any pivotal moments or experiences that allowed you to realize that you had something special?
Well, the one that comes to my mind first and foremost was scaring my mom to death when I was like 3 years old. And that was because my mom was also a gifted medium, but she was really taught through a very young age. She was raised in such a way to really downplay her gifts.
And that was the time. That was the time. It wasn't safe back then.
And it was, what if it's evil and all of these things. And so she worked with herself a lot on those kinds of subjects. But I was about 3, maybe 4 years old, and I was communing with my grandmother early morning hours. It was probably between 2 and 3 in the morning. And she found me on the steps and she said, "Baby, what are you doing down here?" And I was like, "I'm talking to Grandma."
Grandma that's been gone for a little while.
And so it kind of, and I think this will resonate with many of your listeners out there. When you're the weird kid, the weird kid that just is never really quite on the same frequency as everybody else. So everybody gets it. They're a step faster, or they get it in a way that you just never can because you're over here
Your attention is in a different
in a
wavelength.
different wavelength.
Yes.
Then it really does, as a child, you internalize it. But as an adult, looking back on my experiences, there were just so many, and there
Mhm.
were always. It wasn't like a
Always. That
one
is
day
such a
I
common thread.
fell and like this happened, which happens for people. I'm not denying that, but for me personally, it was an
Mhm.
always.
Mhm.
So
That's so interesting. I also had an experience with a great grandmother who I had seen. It was still nighttime. I don't remember if it was 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or whenever it was, but I vividly remember laying in bed, looking up and seeing this woman and going, wow, it's not a regular human, that's alive. So I knew that she was in spirit, and it was both a little bit frightening, but also very comforting all at the same time. But I had a conversation with my mother not too long after that. And she was like, oh, well, that sounds so much like great grandma who had passed away years before I was even born.
Right.
But it's interesting how many of us had these experiences from very, very young ages.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful thing, but also I think we all felt just a little bit different. We all knew
definitely.
that we weren't the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
So did you embrace your gifts easily, or was that something that you also personally struggled with?
I think I had moments of embracing by myself, in the stillness by myself. That's when I could embrace, but socially, yes, it wasn't.
You weren't out of the closet with it.
I really wasn't. I didn't fully, I was doing little things. Well, I guess they would be big things now, but like I was doing those things within my family, but I wasn't out.
Yes.
Until much
home.
later.
Right.
Yeah, much later in life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that you did embrace your gifts there. And thank you so much for joining me on the show today. And so one of the things that we're talking about really is old wisdom, that sacred wisdom, the stuff that's been around forever. Now, Theresa and I have known each other for a very long time.
Yes.
But one of the things that we kind of joke about between ourselves is the concept of calling things new age. And I understand, technically what they are referring to is this is a new age of human consciousness.
Right.
And yet for both you and I and so many others like us are like, but there's nothing new about this.
Right.
This has been around for so long.
Yes.
So in a nutshell, how would you describe sacred wisdom and old world traditions and knowledge?
So I think for me, I always think of a quote from E.B. White, who wrote The Great Charlotte's Web. And he said, did anybody teach a spider how to spin a web? Nobody teaches a spider how to spin a web. From the time that they come into this world until the time that they die, this is knowledge that has been cellularly handed down. And for me, that is what part of like this sacred knowledge is. It comes through the lineage. There is cellular memory attached to it. There are things, and I know we've talked about this before, by the time I was 9, I was doing energy work. Nobody taught me how to do that. By the time I was 11 or 12, I was doing candle work. Nobody taught me how to do that. So there were things, and there were healing things that came through that my dad used to practice that again, that just follow the line, right? On the other hand, there is, I'm a huge book nerd. And so and I know that we've talked about this before too. They don't even make the books. They're not even in print anymore. The things that I grew up reading.
Not that we're old though.
Yeah, not at all. But it's very hard to find certain esoteric knowledge written down anymore. So, there's a lot of new thought on esoteric
There's
knowledge.
A lot of information out there.
Yes, but
it's not necessarily the same as the ancient stuff.
The ancient stuff, yeah, that really is quite hard to find in this day and age.
Yes.
So those, and in my family, we're all very musically inclined. We write poetry, we write stories, we sing, we dance. We're a lot of artists in my family. And so song, using things like song, color, the written word were ways of passing down all of these things,
Mhm.
passing down healings, passing down certain information. So
Which is such a fantastic way of manifesting and
Mhm.
connecting with higher frequencies anyways.
Yes.
The artistic ability is connected to that right brain. The right brain is also where we have imagination
Mhm.
and intuition. So the two things really go hand in hand for sure.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. On the concept of new information,
Mhm.
many people, the OGs, people that have been into spirituality, higher consciousness for decades now,
Mhm.
there's a big eye opening to the fact that there is so much information out there. Everywhere you look, there's a new content creator. They're showing the high life and giving you these little snapshots of things.
Mhm.
How do you think that that differs between old world knowledge, the ancient stuff?
So, and yes, that is to me greatly different. We are in an age of information. There is a sense of deservedness
Mm-hmm.
that kind of goes with that. I want this knowledge. I should have this
Yes.
knowledge. It is
Yes.
mine to have. And I want to make sure I say this right. I'm not trying to shame anybody out there. But the difference in that is that, especially through lineage knowledge,
Right.
there was a responsibility in handing that mantle over
Yes.
to whoever you were teaching, whoever your mentee is.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just well, I know this thing, and therefore, and there wasn't on the other side of that, I want to know this thing, and so therefore.
There were steps involved.
There were steps involved, and that knowledge was to preserve both the sanctity of that knowledge,
Yes.
the sacredness of that knowledge. And again, this had to do with responsibility, care, sensitivity to the culture, things like that. It was different. Like you didn't just hand it out.
There was work involved.
There was work involved. Yes.
Some of that being taught somewhat or learning ways from others, but also a lot of self-study and just experiential.
Yes.
There's a very big difference between knowledge that you can read from a book or watch from a video.
Right.
Versus wisdom of actually doing and experiencing.
Yes.
And in this day and age of such fast moving information.
Oh,
and I love,
yes.
I want to be really
Yes.
clear. I love that there is a big interest in spirituality and higher
Yes.
consciousness
Yes.
because I do believe that once you are exposed to information, you can't unlearn it.
Right.
And I think it does a lot of good, but it is also important to recognize that it's different. If you're just consuming content, but not really understanding the roots behind it and the implications and the spiritual responsibility.
And I really want to touch on that. There's
Absolutely.
a huge amount of spiritual responsibility that needs to go with this.
Absolutely.
You are projecting out onto the great big projector, right? That is the universe. And if we accept this concept that we are all one, if we accept this concept that we are all one, then we do need to have spiritual discipline. It is not just about what's wanted, when it's wanted, how it's wanted, if I want it, do I like it? It's not just the self.
Right.
It has to be about, does this honor, respect, and contribute to the highest consciousness that we say that we're going for, that we're actually trying to attain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is you and I obviously believe this and many others too. We may appear to be separate, but we are all part of the same energy gestalt. We're all part of that same consciousness that is, again, from source, the divine infinite creator, whether you call it God, whether you call it the higher power, whatever title you want to give it.
Right.
And also just not to get too far off track, but you also mentioned something about every culture, honoring every culture, right? So we do need to be very reverent of, cultural appropriation and appreciate different cultures, but not to pirate their things, have some sacredness around there.
Right.
But it's also important to remind everyone, every single culture throughout the history of time has had some kind of spiritual practices.
Right.
There's been seers, there's been mystics in every single culture.
Absolutely.
So regardless of what you are, your people have
Right.
something too, and you can still appreciate other people's cultures
Yes,
too, but do so
absolutely.
with maturity and some reverence for
the knowledge.
the knowledge and the
That there's-
people that have protected it and
Yes.
carried it forward,
And I think in the realm of the gatekeeping conversation,
which is an important one.
when we talk about social norms,
Mhm.
you know, is it popular to quote gatekeep anything right now? No, it's not. But can it be important? Yes. Can it be necessary? Yes.
Yes.
We gatekeep the making of bombs for that reason.
For that reason. Yes.
So we, you know, not that people have, you know, but just as an example, as
Uh-huh.
a metaphorical example, there are certain things
Yes.
that you do need, again, coming with the spiritual and emotional maturity and spiritual wisdom and discipline to use
Yes.
in the world, right? We
Yes.
are still in the 3D. There are still consequences for things.
Oh, there's absolutely consequences. Let's talk a little bit about those consequences.
Mhm.
Okay. So without spiritual maturity and without really having a deep understanding of what sacred wisdom is used for,
Mhm.
right? So we laugh about this often, the
Yes.
many times that people will say, well, this person broke my heart
Yes.
and I want to hex them, or
Yes.
or what's worse is I want to get them back.
Right. They should pay.
Right.
I'm
There's
in pain. They should pay.
retaliation
Yes.
and that type of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many, who among us hasn't gotten their heart completely broken?
Right. It's part of the human
It's part of the
saga.
human experience. I have very passionate, strong feelings on this subject, which Tana knows, because I believe in practicing defensively, but that is not defensively, is it?
No.
That is offensively. And in the space of extreme hurt, your knees are hitting the floor, you are in pain. You are not going to be able to process or have the introspection needed to understand your own patterns,
Right.
other than the ones you're already accepting and acknowledging. But this is going to call for deeper work.
Yes.
So you're not in a space to objectively look at this. It's a minefield when you're in that space, and you're
You
stepping
can
on
make a lot of
every-
mistakes
Yeah,
that can impact yourself negatively
exactly,
as well as everyone
as
else.
everyone else. And so that is not the time to be, at least not in my opinion, that is not the time. Pour your heart out, write it out, sing it out,
Mhm.
scribble, paint, play, like
Process it in any way
process
that is
it.
healthy.
You know, do what you want and it harm none. That is a tenet for a reason.
Yes.
You know, like as long as you're not harming another human, you have this expanse of wilderness to, you know, explore,
Mhm.
you know, and we can really get down into our feelings. And not forsaking that, you know, not to go on too much about it, but not forsaking that, though that hurt that you're experiencing in the present is bringing up the oldest wound that you have in the past to come up to be healed.
Right.
Should that person that broke your heart, that person that divinely agreed with your soul prior to coming down to break your heart, to
This
crack
is
you
important
open,
stuff right here. This is important stuff.
to crack you open to the barest of bleached bones, so that you can stand in everything that you ever were or thought you were and understand the truth of it. Should that person pay for that? I mean, this is where we're going.
Right. And one of the things that we're getting at here is your soul has a plan. Okay. So let's just kind of spell out the difference between your human self, right? That's
Right.
us that are walking around with our lower mind,
Right.
believing that this tangible reality is the only reality,
Right.
right? And then you've got your higher self.
Right.
Now, your higher self, before you incarnated, has pre-planned obstacles, trials, tribulations, so that your soul can grow. Now, that growth is uncomfortable and it can hurt, and
Yes.
it's often called the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
And it serves a purpose, even though it is not fun.
Yes.
Now, having said that, if somebody is looking to do spell work or affirmations or any kind of spiritual work or sacred,
Yes.
wisdom used to shortcut those things, Would you say, is that in the benefit of their soul's growth?
I think they're setting themselves back about 3 doors.
Yes.
I think that that's what you're doing. And, and I don't want to go up too far on the deep end of this, but when we talk about, when I say spiritual bypassing, that's what I mean.
And spiritual bypassing is another huge topic
Yes.
that we see going on a lot.
Yes.
That the ones that have been around for a really long time
Yes.
understand that sometimes that pain holds life into balance.
Right.
Not saying that any of us like it,
Yes.
but when we're trying to bypass life struggles and tribulations by spiritually bypassing it, we're
Right.
not growing.
We're not growing.
We're cutting ourselves off.
Absolutely.
From our own highest aspects.
And then, and it's a vicious little cycle, right?
It certainly is.
You don't trust yourself. You don't like the discomfort. You don't want to go through the thing. So you do everything you can to not feel it and not go through the thing, right? And then you find yourself there again, because you will, right? You're going through that spiral. You will. And then you say, how could you do this to me? I can't trust myself. What?
Right?
You could always trust yourself. This
spiritual stuff is supposed to work. How come it didn't work this time? Right. So on that thought, we've got to take a break really quick, but when we come back, we're going to jump right back in there as to why it didn't work. What is outweighing that spiritual bypassing? So you were listening to Awakening the Gift with me, psychic medium Montana Greene, and my special guest today, Theresa Michelle Servin. Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to explore more on this topic of spiritual bypassing, spiritual maturity, and that beautiful sacred wisdom. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We're back on Awakening the Gift with me, psychic medium Montana Greene, and my very special guest, gifted psychic medium and healer, Theresa Michelle Servin. So before we get going, Theresa, I want to make sure that people know how to contact you. Is there the best way for the listeners to contact you?
Well, it's after a 5.5 year hiatus.
Sometimes you have to do that.
Yes, sometimes you have to do that. 80% of my family decided to transition. So they all went, we're out.
Major event in a person's life.
Major event. So after about that long of kind of being quiet and still and healing and doing the whole thing, I have a brand new Facebook page, which we'll link up, and you are welcome to visit me there.
And the name of that is
Moon Huntress Metaphysics.
She always comes up with great names.
Oh, see,
she's very talented. Very talented.
I just really, one of my little alter egos is Artemis, and I was a lover of Greek mythology as a child.
Yes, I've always known you to be that.
And so she was always one of my favorite kind of patrons.
She's a great one. Yes. She is a great one. And for everyone who wants to contact me, you can do so at my website, whisperingleafpsychic.com. So yeah, yes, absolutely. And we're talking about spiritual maturity.
Yes, Montana.
And the problems when somebody tries to spiritually bypass a preordained trial in their life.
Yes.
But I want to kind of talk about this a little bit, because I'm sure that you've had clients that have done the same thing. So I've had multiple clients throughout time, and I don't practice this professionally for people. So don't come to me for any kind of spell work, because I do not do that for others.
Right.
But I've often had people come and say, this guy cheated on me and he was really terrible, and I found out all these awful things he did. Can you do something to make him pay?
Right.
Or the other one, which is also kind of worse, is this man broke my heart, or this woman, or whoever, whatever, right? Because it really, all people have, wanted to do these kind of things, but they'll want to get the person back.
Yes.
Now that is also very, very dangerous, because maybe their soul plan was not to ever be with that person.
Exactly. There's a few things there, right? Like
absolutely.
We've talked about this before. Maybe their soul plan was for those two to come together, for that person to get initiated, to have that
initiated
awakening.
Like a dark night of the soul.
Exactly. To have that awakening.
Yes.
And I really want to, from a very far vantage point here, So many of us are coming into relationship caring about all of our conditioning, our past experiences, our patterns we are aware of, and patterns we are not
Those are the
aware,
subconscious ones.
right?
Mhm.
And what's the role of the subconscious? To keep everything in homeostasis, keep everything safe, and
your conscious mind will
you know,
never be able to willpower its way
right,
or outpower the subconscious.
exactly.
A solid 90% of our daily habits and decisions come from that subconscious. And that is
Yes.
basically programmed in the first 7 years of life. But I honestly think a lot of that also takes place in utero.
Absolutely.
We're always absorbing information.
Yes.
So things that you're not even consciously aware of and don't even
Yes.
consciously remember learning are still programmed in your subconscious. And this is true for all human beings.
Yes.
So, it's an across the board kind of
It
thing.
is an across the board kind of thing. Now, to be clear, don't come at us. We're not saying you deserve to be cheated on. That's not the conversation we're having right now. But what we are saying is that if you are not aware of I always call them Saturn's rings, right? You're bringing with
Which
you.
Saturn is karma and its
Right.
lessons and the planet of teaching
Of
hard
teaching.
lessons, not fun, easy ones.
Right. This is not your happy uncle, like, oh, it's
No.
okay. This is in your face lessons.
Mhm.
And if you are not aware of your karma, if you are not aware of your Saturn rings, your conditioning, the patterns that you're bringing, the long held belief you've had since you were a year-old baby that nobody wanted you, whatever it is,
Whatever it is,
that has you looking for love in all the wrong places,
Mhm.
Chasing.
Or as we used to say, shopping in the scratch and dent aisle.
Yes. Okay. Have you ever been personally victimized by your attraction to certain men or women? Right. Yeah. So
Not me.
Not me. Of course not. But if you don't know these things,
Correct.
right? And here is this person that is a living, walking personification, representation
Yeah.
of these things,
Mhm.
right? To help you to get out of the loop you find yourself in.
And sometimes these people come and they can be very attractive to us, right?
Right,
Because they need to be
absolutely.
to draw you into that. But the
Absolutely.
premise of the relationship is to be a pattern disruption.
Yes.
It is to change up what you've been habitually doing so that
Mhm.
you can have greater self-awareness,
Yes.
which is kind of code word for taking you through a dark night of the soul so that you can recognize what needs to be changed.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
But trying to spiritually bypass that and trying to override these plans that your higher self has made for yourself, it's going to be a very difficult one. So what if somebody say they're doing affirmations or they do some spell work, maybe they bought a book off of Amazon or saw a bunch of YouTube videos,
Right.
which nowadays people can really do that.
Right.
And we see a lot of
Yes.
people doing that
Yes.
without understanding the repercussions of it for both themselves
Yes.
as well as other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As unpopular as this might make me, I don't agree with it at all. I don't find it to be.
Maybe gatekeeping is necessary.
Sometimes I think gatekeeping is necessary. If I know how to really cause problems for another human, right? I'm not going to give that information out willy-nilly.
Right.
I'm just not. I'm going to give that beautiful human that came down here to experience all the table, not just the happiest parts of the table, not just the, not just the greatest things.
Yeah.
I'm going to give that human time to reflect, have some introspection, have some growth, have some change, heal.
Yeah.
Right.
Find a new version of themselves.
Rather
than picking up the old habits.
Exactly.
And the old comfort zones because it feels good. Right.
Well, and who hasn't wanted divine justice before? Like who hasn't? But in 6 to 8 months, or maybe a year, or maybe 2 years,
Exactly.
your divine justice could look extremely different than what you're asking for in the moment.
Right.
That divine justice could look so, so different. And maybe it has nothing to do with the SOB who broke your heart.
Right.
Maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it is all about okay, you know, your life ascends to a higher experience than the one that you were previously living.
Right.
You know, what if your gifts come online?
Exactly. And that
You know?
oftentimes happens through a dark night of the soul. And that's
Absolutely.
why spiritual bypassing can be so detrimental and actually restrict the person.
Yes.
This is like boxing yourselves in
Yes.
by not being able to discover some abilities and resiliency and strengths, sometimes talents and skills that you did
Yes.
not realize as that old version of yourself.
Absolutely. And resilience is so important, especially spiritually. I always say,
Oh,
if
gosh,
you have
yes.
good spiritual boundaries, you will have good physical, spatial awareness. You'll have good boundaries in life, in the 3D.
Right.
But if you have poor spiritual boundaries, you're going to be getting it from all sides.
Boundaries everywhere are
Yes.
very important, but especially spiritual boundaries,
Yes.
because those are the ones that are always going on, whether you're asleep or whether you're awake.
Exactly.
Okay. It's not just when you're conscious of it,
Right.
which again is why spiritual maturity
Mhm.
and going through the steps,
Yes.
like graduating up to the
Yes.
next level, is so important when it comes to spiritual information,
Right.
sacred knowledge. Again, just like in school.
Yes, I was just thinking that. I was just thinking that,
Yeah.
like,
You don't throw calculus
yeah,
at the second grader.
exactly.
They're not at that level yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was just thinking that. That's so funny. Yeah. There are steps to, and the other piece of that I think people tend to kind of downplay is the sense of self-worth and self-accomplishment
Mhm.
and
Oh,
achievement
so true.
that you will gain for yourself going through the hard times.
Mhm.
And trust me, I've been through some stuff.
Right. Nobody's speaking from the rainbows
nobody
and
is-
butterfly
yeah,
perspective of
exactly.
life.
I came from a very poor family. I came from a family who didn't have anything. I do know what it is to struggle. I do know what it is to live in survival and to be sitting there going, what are you talking about? I'm not happy. I have to go through like, when does this stuff end?
Right.
When does
Right.
the bad end and the good
This
begin?
doesn't feel good.
Yes, and I totally get that. But what I will say is that as your resiliency
Mhm.
grows, you have access to doors that you didn't previously have access to. And if you think very hard, if the people that are listening really take a minute and think hard,
Mhm.
and it might be a really hard thing. I don't know for some people, but
PTSD flashbacks.
there have been times there has been support in your life. You've been taken
Yes.
care of. You haven't gone without. In at least
Mhm.
some facets somewhere,
Yeah.
whether it's you've never been homeless, you've always had a meal, you've always
Yeah.
had a best friend, you've always had a pet, something somewhere.
Right.
Right. And I think we have to embrace that,
Absolutely.
that there is no such thing as complete, like absolute detriment, absolute, like
Yeah.
in this absolution mindset,
Mhm.
right? We can't go there,
Mhm. Right.
Right.
So I want to touch on something that you touched on previously about resiliency, right?
Mhm.
So just speaking from some of my own personal experiences of the several dark nights of the soul that
Yes.
I've gotten a chance to go through, which I didn't love.
Right.
While I was actually going through it, I was like, this is really, really horrible.
Yes.
Why is this happening? This isn't fair. All of the things.
Yes.
On the other side of it, I can look back at those and go, I am so glad I went through that.
Absolutely.
It wasn't fun. I still, 1 star. I didn't have it a
Yes.
good time. Would not recommend.
Yeah.
Would not stay there again.
Yeah.
However, I became a different version of myself. And here's the thing with experiences. Nobody can ever take it away from you.
Absolutely. And that sense, like I said, the sense of accomplishment.
Right. You
Right?
become a different person.
You really do.
Yeah.
And, in my own experiences, going from not caring at all what people thought to caring way too much what people thought, and then coming back to a more of a balanced energy of, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, but no, that doesn't look good for me. So I'm not going to eat that,
Right.
like I'm not going to take that in,
And it's also important to recognize that we are going to facilitate in life a
Yes,
little
absolutely.
bit. Let's talk a little bit about cycles. I recently had some clients too, which my heart goes out to them. we're really going through a very challenging time that nobody wants to go through. Nobody says, give me bankruptcy. This is fun. Nobody ever says that.
Right.
And yet what the guides kept coming through with is it's only a cycle. Okay. There will be times when you're up and there will be times when you're down, and you just, I'm sorry, but you can't affirmation your way out of that.
Right.
You can't meditate your way out of that. You
Right.
can't do a little spell out of that. Life has cycles.
Absolutely.
There will always be ups and downs.
Mhm.
The main thing that you want to do is try to learn something from that, try to grow from that, and not
Yes.
to get so sucked into it that you lose your hope in yourself.
Right. That you
And
lose
in
perspective.
life, that you lose perspective.
You know, there are
Yeah.
and I don't remember who wrote that part about, the gifts in the boxes of darkness, you get
Oh.
handed this box of total darkness that you never
Yeah.
asked for and didn't want, and
Right.
all the things, right? But there's always, if you're of the mindset to look for the gifts in that box of
Right.
darkness, no matter what that box is, you will come out of the other side knowing a profound,
Mhm.
I believe, a profound spiritual truth that you did not have access to prior.
Correct. But what is required to have that perspective? Spiritual maturity,
Spiritual maturity, emotional maturity,
emotional maturity,
right?
just,
Yeah.
and life matures us. Life
Right.
events mature us. If everything is rainbows and butterflies and no struggle ever, what do you learn?
Right.
You don't.
You
And
don't.
that's what makes a soul rich is experiences.
Mhm.
So, again, spiritual bypassing and those type of things, our souls are wanting us to grow in a specific way. Sometimes people have karma, so touching on the relationship stuff, again, this was a client, no information beyond that, but a client that I had that was really just persistent with getting an individual back. And truly, the guidance that kept coming through was, this is a karmic relationship. You were meant to come together to realize that you were better than that and to leave him.
Right.
And yet this individual would not accept that, would not accept that.
Gotcha.
And not me, did not pay me for this,
Oh, wow.
but elicited the professional services of many other workers, spiritual workers, craft people, that kind of thing. And she got bilked out of $30,000. So don't, okay? If the universe and life is giving you no, don't keep pushing. Don't pay somebody to work a magic spell.
Right.
Don't do those kind of things. It's better to sit back, wait. There's something that's going to come out of that situation, and you can't override the soul's plan. I had a mentor, a teacher once that I loved her phrase, but she said, God's plan B is better than your plan A.
Amen.
I thought it was really great.
Religious.
I'm not religious at all.
But amen. Yes.
Right.
Because that when we talk, I talk in a lot of fragments, so I'm just going to warn all of you right now. But, it's like I said, the tower has fallen, the bricks have fallen. You're in the hallway. You can't see your hand in front of your face right now. This is not the time to get anybody back.
Not
right?
the time.
Not the time, because the door to your room is not ready yet, right? They're still buffing the floors. They're still doing all those things. You're not ready to ascend to that version of yourself yet. The whole reason for this dark hallway is to give you the time, space, rest, renewal, rejuvenation, all that energy,
Right.
so that you can do the inner work needed, that spiritual discipline, right? To be able to have access to that door of the next self, the higher plane. For all my gamers out there, you don't get to the next level by staying in the one level, right? Like
that is correct.
That doesn't happen, right? And you have to beat the boss. And when we talk about spirituality, the boss oftentimes is not the person that harmed us, it's ourselves.
Yes. Now, this is a whole other deeper conversation about karma too, as far as sometimes karma is actually a function of our own consciousness. We are doing it to ourselves. So again, that's why having that introspection, that self-awareness, and kind of taking stock of the situation that you're in, rather than get this person back or do this little affirmation, that spiritual bypassing, right?
Absolutely.
So we have to find out what's going on in us. that has caused our higher self to say, hey, this is an experience that you need.
Right.
And that is not blaming of anybody.
No.
That is simply observation. But again, when you're of a higher maturity level, you can understand that. Those that are not quite as mature, and I'm just talking, emotionally mature,
Right.
they perceive that to be blame, but that's not what's going on. That's
Right.
not what's going on at all.
And it's funny you bring that up, and we'll have to talk about this some other time, but it's funny you bring up the concept of blame, because often when we refer to LOA, law of attraction,
Right.
or your Saturn rings, or anything that you're
Right.
bringing with you, blame really gets talked about, and it has nothing to do with blame at all.
Right.
So that's interesting to me.
And again, life goes through cycles.
Mhm.
So just because you had a downturn doesn't mean that you were a bad person in a previous life.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Life just will have ups and downs. It's cycles. There's endings and beginnings, and those completions can feel like our life is falling apart sometimes. Right. But
Yes.
it's not about blame. It's about keeping things moving.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
simply cycles there.
Right.
Yes.
And the lower you go down, the higher you ascend. So
It's so true.
You're going to have your up moment again.
You will.
You are
Absolutely.
absolutely going to feel the free air and breathe it and just feel a lot better about life, you, yourself, like the person, like all of those things are going to come back.
Yeah.
It's just, it might take a little time, and that's okay. It's okay. Time is our friend.
Of course, if you're not a very patient person, that's not a fun process
No, it
either.
is not.
Patience is not an easy thing
No, it is
for
not.
anyone.
For
So if
anybody.
you're wanting your instant results right away, just know that you're normal, but
Mhm.
also know that that is not always how life works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in this age of information, and with how fast everything moves, we do have a tendency for both ourselves and for others to forget their humanity. And our
Absolutely.
humanity, and all the grace that you are willing to extend yourself, eventually you will extend to others,
Absolutely.
that they are just human too.
They are just
We're
human
having
too.
this experience.
Everyone is.
We're doing the best we can with what we got.
Yep. Yep. And on that note, we're going to take a break. But again, before we take a break, I want to make sure that everybody knows how to contact me. And you can reach me at my website, which is whisperingleafpsychic.com. And your Facebook to be able to locate you
Is Moon Huntress Metaphysics.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to pick up on the topic of spiritual bypassing, spiritual maturity, and talk a little bit more about karma and what happens energetically when we try to control somebody else. So stay tuned. We will be right back. We're back on Awakening the Gift with me, psychic medium Montana Greene, and my special guest today, gifted psychic and healer, Theresa Michelle Servin. And again, we're talking about spiritual maturity, spiritual bypassing, but now we're going to jump into a little bit of karma with that. So again, as we kind of talked a little bit about, it's kind of popular these days now that sacred wisdom is available all over the internet. You can get on Instagram and find 10 content creators or YouTube, or order a book from Amazon, whatever. You don't have to go through the actual development and learning stages anymore.
Yeah.
And what I have noticed is a lot of people that are now threatening to hex their ex or, curse or do negative spell work to a boss or a neighbor or anybody, any foe that they don't like.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what goes on when people do that, because they don't understand the depth and the repercussions of those things.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify foe, because just because someone disagrees with you, just because someone doesn't share your viewpoint, just because someone bothers you that day, maybe they're having an off day, just because they hurt your feelings. This is not, do we really have the right to be projecting that out there onto that person? I liken it to almost like a spiritual credit card. And people are just spending, and those bills will catch up.
with interest.
with interest. Yes. And
Which is where the law of three kind of works nicely into this conversation.
absolutely
What you
exists.
put out does come back to you. Even though you will have content creators that are out there now, and again, peace and love to everybody. This
Right.
is just an observation, but there are content creators that will say, oh no, if you do it this certain way, it's nothing bad's going to come back to
Right.
you. And there are certain things, defensive, defensive
Yes.
actions are okay. There's the return to sender, which
Yes.
also is okay.
Yeah, that one's a free card.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But there's others, anything that you're putting out to another person is going to come back to you. And what my guides have shown me is basically imagine our little world, our little universe
Mhm.
as a swimming pool. And you push water out, and that's going to ripple all the way out to the end of that pool. And then it's going to reverberate off the edge of the pool and come back to you. Because we do live in this little container, this finite container. It's actually not as infinite as like they want to say.
Right.
Anyways, what you put out is going to come back. So if you're putting out grace or some understanding of it, I've screwed up too, I'm human too, then that is also what comes back to you.
Right.
Additionally, with people that are wanting to hex the X, which is such a common thing, and we all get it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It hurts to have your heart broken. But when they're sending out that energy, they're just going to bring it back to them, and they're connecting themselves in an energetic loop with them.
Absolutely.
And this is something that I think people don't really understand.
No.
Is, say for an example, just an example, I'm like, okay, this person has done something bad to me, so I'm going to use my spiritual weapons against you. Well, that means she and I have just gotten into an energetic loop with one another.
Right.
So whatever I send to her, I'm going to get back to me.
Right.
Whatever I, wish ill upon you will be returned back to me. And then you're linked. Then you have karma with this individual that you either have to mop up in this lifetime, which again takes self-awareness and some maturity. And if you don't get it this lifetime, don't worry, kid. You'll be able to do it next lifetime. Who wants to have that rollover? It's not good.
It's not good. And here's the piece that a lot of people will probably not accept. That same karma can touch your family.
See, and this is also true.
That same karma can touch your children. It can show up in their lives. It can help for you later in life. So you can think you're free and clear spending that credit card.
Right.
And that can show up in another 10 years.
Right.
This isn't we know that time has collapsed, right? So it's all happening now.
Right.
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 But we also know that through our own human perception, it's layered.
It certainly is.
So
and
you
this
can
infinite
experience
spiral
things at different moments.
Right.
So we're the rule of three. And I even heard people go even further than that. And again, I'm not trying to pick fight here, but I have heard people say there is no such thing. I'm going to practice any way I want. You can't stop me. It's let's just say it doesn't embody an understanding. So when to me, it's kind of denying gravity. It's spiritual gravity. And we're human. We're going to have our off days, but so is the other human going to have their off days. And it's not going to all be, live, laugh, love all the time. We get that, right? But you do have control.
Right.
Or you should have control over some of your own basic reactionary.
Yes. This is maturity. This is self-discipline.
This is self-discipline.
Whether it's spiritual discipline or self-discipline, but it is that discipline.
Absolutely. And I have seen some of these things close up. There was and now he wasn't one of my clients, but the mother-in-law of his wife, she did some brujeria on him because he had beat her daughter within an inch of her life.
Yeah. Wow. Yep.
And so I have seen some of these kinds of things. Now, is it for me to be judge and jury about all that? No, but that doesn't mean that person is exempt. And that doesn't mean
they're still going to get it.
They're still going to
get their
karma.
Equal.
They're still in this life. We still, when we come down and we experience this temporal and temporary universe, none of us are exempt.
Right.
None of us. So,
And it's interesting how that can come back to a person too.
mhm.
You know, it may not have anything to do with the girlfriend or daughter that was beat within an inch of their life, might
Yeah.
not have anything to do with that particular family.
Exactly.
It can be, you know, years down the
Years down
road
the road.
having to do with their career or their finances and nothing to do with like love relationships.
Right.
It's a very interesting balancing act that happens.
But that will absolutely happen. Yes.
Mhm.
Like there's, right. So we can come in with so much imbalance, right?
Yes.
Between us and the other person that the universe literally pulls you back.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And you see it in all sorts of ways.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
So personally, I do not promote this idea that spiritual gravity doesn't exist, AKA the law of three. I do not promote this idea that you just basically you're just spending and you spend and spend and spend and there's
And never any consequences
never any
to anything.
consequences and you're just free and clear. I don't, not for myself anyway.
Now, I think it's also important to note on, sometimes people genuinely don't know that they're doing wrong, right?
Right.
Karma is not assessed in the same way for that.
No.
It's when you intentionally plan to do harm or to do something that you know
Sure.
is wrong.
Right.
And so this is when your higher self, your consciousness says, okay, there's a mark in the old karma column over here. We'll get this lesson back to you, your rings of Saturn. We'll get
Right.
this lesson back to you at an opportune time.
Right.
Right. But what you don't know, you're not held to the same standard of.
Exactly. You are not held to that same standard. So
if you have screwed up, don't worry, you're not going to be like
Right.
tremendously punished because if it wasn't your intention.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that doesn't mean like, oh, I didn't know that hurt your feelings. It's okay. And not quite so much. Okay. Because there is a part of you that does recognize that. So
Right.
it may not be the human self that totally understands it, but the soul's consciousness does. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, because this carries over with you every lifetime,
Right.
experiences from all spans of time there. So if your higher soul knows that that is a transgression, that is a wrongdoing, it gets marked in that karma.
It really does. And there's,
But you can also undo your karma. You can be a good person intentionally. Try it.
yeah. And there's so much to be said for being kind.
There's so much to be said for being kind.
Oh my gosh. Like people think, and it's really funny to me. I saw this a lot years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. There was this huge wave, this mass of people that were like, well, we don't want to be love and light. We want to be dark and
I
evil
remember
and
that.
romanticize all this,
Yeah.
And I thought it was so funny because as my niece Lindsay, she brought up a very good point. And she said, you don't need more darkness to balance out this world. This world already has.
I don't.
It has enough. What you need is
Right.
more light. What you need is more kindness. And again, coming back to that, just you don't have to be the most perfect person on the planet.
Nobody will ever be perfect.
Right. Like you don't have to.
You're gonna facilitate.
Right.
You're gonna have those ebbs and flows. Your goal is to find
Absolutely.
the balance with it the best that you can.
The best that you can.
Yeah.
Right. You open the door because you want to open the door for
Uh-huh.
someone else, not so that they'll like you.
You're right.
Right. You go through life just, it's okay.
Yeah.
Relax. And I think the key to that is the more you accept yourself, the less you need other people to do that job for you.
That is very, very true. And again, that's why experiencing what life is giving you rather than trying to spiritually bypass it is
Mhm.
so enriching.
Absolutely.
You get to learn more about yourself. So it's
Mhm.
funny, talking about the times when the left-hand path,
Yeah.
the more dark stuff was for some reason more
Really big.
popular.
Yeah,
It was
really,
strange.
really big.
It was weird because I remember that time too. And I'm just kind of like, oh, wow, you actually feel good about that. Okay, well, carry on, but I won't be there.
Yeah.
Right. But it was interesting. So this brings up another instance from working with a client that I had. It was a guy whose girlfriend basically was threatening, I'm going to make your life terrible. It's a New Orleans thing. So she had all of this knowledge,
Yeah.
yada, yada. She was basically going to hex him, right?
Right.
And so he came to me like, I'm so worried. I really think my ex-girlfriend did this to me. And I'm just really freaked out about it. And I looked at the situation, and here's something that I really want to express to people too.
Mhm.
In this day and age where this information is just a finger stroke away, It doesn't mean that the people that have access to this information, one, have the spiritual maturity, the discipline, or the power and the relationship to actually be effective with it.
Absolutely.
So in this guy's situation, just talking about his situation, in this guy's situation, that ex-girlfriend had no ability to do anything negative to him on a spiritual level because she was such a mess.
Right.
You know, just because she watched a couple of YouTube videos, got a book off of Amazon,
Right.
doesn't mean that she had built up that power and that knowledge, because there's a relationship with non-physical beings that are very helpful. Well, she didn't have that relationship.
Right.
But this guy was scared to death.
Right.
So again, I'm just going to say this because it kind of cracks me up. Yes, there are people in the world that absolutely know how to wield
Yes.
spiritual knowledge for their gain, right?
Yes.
And I've met some of them, and wow,
Yes.
right? But there's also a lot that are charlatans,
Right.
that are total fakers.
Right.
And my kind of litmus test for that is, you know, are they going to tell you that they're going to make your life terrible and their life so good? Well, is their life good? You know, do you see the results of their own handiwork?
Right.
Because I have seen a lot of people that are like, I'll do a money spell for you, but they themselves are broke.
Right.
Or I'll bring you love, but they themselves can't get along with a single person. Those aren't the people that you want doing any kind of work for you,
Well,
right?
exactly. I mean, would you go to, I don't know, just Joe Schmo for your taxes? Like it just,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense.
It
you
doesn't
know?
make any sense.
And if they can't wield it in their own lives, that really
Right.
is very telling.
It is very telling.
You know, it's really telling about and where they see themselves.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're having so much fun. Yes. And I want to thank my guest, Theresa Michelle, today for coming with and joining us here, and for all your wisdom and your experiences. And I, of course, want to thank all of you for tuning in to Awakening the Gift with me, Psychic Medium Montana Greene. Be sure to tune in every second and fourth Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Now, Hollywood, next subject. Hollywood has spun an intriguing tale of what a psychic reading and what a psychic is. Now, how much of that is fact and how much of that is pure fiction? Join us on our next episode of Awakening the Gift, also with Theresa Michelle Servin, as she returns to demystify the essence of psychics and psychic readings. So we'll uncover those myths, we'll set that record straight, and we'll get down to what it truly is and what it is not. Thank you all so much for joining us. Until next time, be well and well wishes to you. Thank you. You have been listening to Awakening the Gift with Psychic Medium Montana Greene, igniting a stream of consciousness within you. To find out more of what is needed to shift your consciousness above the ordinary, tune in to Transformation Talk Radio every second and fourth Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. Each show we examine spirituality, mysticism, and metaphysics, along with the tools to help us achieve our life's missions. To connect with me, visit whisperingleafpsychic.com.